Most people assume the spiritual path is a ladder. You start at the bottom, ignorant, unworthy, separated, and you climb. You pray, you petition, you perform the right rituals in the right sequence, and if you're devoted enough, if you're humble enough, maybe the divine leans down and acknowledges you. That's the architecture almost every major religious institution has handed you. Vertical, hierarchical, you below, God above. Distance as the default condition of the human soul. But what if the ladder is the trap? What if the entire structure, the kneeling, the beseeching, the positioning of yourself as fundamentally cut off from the source, was never designed to get you closer to anything? What if it was designed to keep you exactly where you are? There is a tradition that said precisely this. It was ancient, it was sophisticated, and it was systematically hunted. Its texts were burned, its teachers were expelled, its communities were scattered, and its ideas were buried under nearly 2,000 years of institutional damage control. But it survived, and what it survived to tell us is this: there is a hidden exit from the system. The Archons, the cosmic administrators of this reality, are counting on you never finding it. And the door to that exit isn't somewhere above you, it's somewhere inside you. That's what we're getting into today. I'm Daniel, and this is Gnostic Talk. Let's start with the structure itself, because before you can understand the exit, you have to understand what you're exiting from. The Gnostic cosmological picture is startling when you first encounter it, not because it's strange, but because it's precise. It doesn't just say the world is flawed, it says the world is administered. There is a layer of reality between the human soul and the true divine source, and that layer is populated by what the ancient Gnostic texts call the Archons, ruling powers, administrators, the craftsmen of the cage. Now, if you want the full breakdown of what the Archons actually are, I covered that in depth in what is probably my most comprehensive video to date. This is the last video you'll ever need about the Archons. I'll link it. But the short version for today is this. The Archons, in the Gnostic framework, are not demons in the Halloween sense. They are systemic forces, intelligences that maintain the structure of material reality and, critically, the structure of human consciousness within it. They are the reason you feel perpetually separated from something you can't quite name. Here's where it gets cosmically significant. The separation isn't accidental. According to texts like the Apocryphon of John, one of the most important documents found at Nag Hammadi in 1945, the Demiurge, the Archon's architect, constructed the human being specifically without full knowledge of what it was embedding. The divine spark, the pneuma, was placed inside the human frame, but the human frame was then handed a story that told it the spark wasn't there, or that it was there but unreachable, or that reaching it required the right intermediary, the right institution, the right set of permissions. That's not a spiritual teaching, that's a containment strategy. The Apocryphon of John describes the Demiurge declaring, "I am a jealous God, and there is no other God beside me." The Gnostic commentary on this line is devastating in its simplicity. A truly supreme being has nothing to be jealous of. Jealousy implies competition. Competition implies limits. A God who needs to announce his supremacy is not, in fact, supreme. He is a local administrator who doesn't want you to find out about the management above him. Now, here's the practical consequence of all this, and I want you to stay with me because this is where the theology stops being abstract and starts being something you feel. If the Archons are administrators of a system designed to maintain your sense of separation, then any spiritual practice that begins from the assumption of separation is operating within their framework. Not against it, within it. Prayer, in its most conventional form, begins with separation as its premise. You are here, the divine is there. You are insufficient, the divine is sufficient. You are petitioning, the divine is deciding. Every element of the structure reinforces the gap. And reinforcing the gap is precisely what the Archons require to maintain the cage. Before we continue, there's something I want to place in your hands. We've gathered the forgotten texts, the ones the Church sealed away for 17 centuries, into a single guide for those who feel the pull towards something deeper. Because whether we speak of the Archons, the Demiurge, or the Divine Spark, one truth remains. This knowledge was never meant to be lost. This is for anyone who senses there's more to this reality than we've been told, and who's ready to remember it. You'll find it in the link in the description below, or you can scan the QR code right here. I'll give you a moment to do that. I want to be precise here and not overstate this. There are forms of prayer that function differently. Contemplative traditions within Christianity, certain Sufi practices, aspects of Jewish mysticism that move towards something closer to what the Gnostics were pointing at. I'm not making a blanket condemnation of all interior spiritual practice. I'm pointing at the dominant institutional form, the form most people inherit, the one that positions you as fundamentally distant from the divine and uses that distance as leverage. That's the tell. That's where you look for the fingerprints of the Archons. Not in the overtly sinister, but in the quietly assumed. The assumption that you need permission. The assumption that you are, by default, unworthy. The assumption that the gap between you and the source is the natural and permanent condition of your existence. It isn't. And the Gnostics built an entire cosmological architecture to explain why. So, if the Archons are the administrators of separation, what is the thing they are administering you away from? What is the source the system is designed to obscure? The Gnostics called it the monad. And I want to slow down here because this word gets thrown around in esoteric circles in ways that sand off all its edges. The monad is not simply another word for God in the conventional sense. The conventional God, creator, judge, administrator of moral consequences, is actually much further down the Gnostic hierarchy. The monad is something prior to all of that, prior to creation, prior to distinction, prior to the very concept of a deity who acts. The trimorphic Protonoia, another Nag Hammadi text, opens with one of the most extraordinary declarations in all of ancient literature. The voice speaking says, "I am the movement that dwells in the all. I exist before the all, and I am the all, since I exist in everyone." I spent a long evening once just sitting with those lines. I had the text open on my desk, and I kept going back to that opening, turning it over, because it doesn't read like theology. It reads like something trying to describe itself from the inside. That's the monad. Not a being that exists somewhere, a reality that exists as the ground of everything that exists, including you. The Apocryphon of John describes the monad this way. The monad is a monarchy with nothing above it. It is pure light, which no eye can behold. Pure light no eye can behold. Think about what that means. It's not that the monad is hidden because it's been locked away. It's that the monad is hidden because it is so fundamental to the structure of perception itself that ordinary perception slides over it the way an eye cannot look directly at its own looking. You can't see the monad through ordinary consciousness for the same reason you can't bite your own teeth. It is the thing doing the looking. Now here's where the Gnostic picture diverges from almost every other spiritual framework in a way that changes everything. Most traditions say, the divine is up there, you are down here, the spiritual life is the attempt to close the gap. The Gnostics said, the gap is the illusion. The divine is not somewhere you need to reach, it is what you are at the most fundamental level. The spark, what they called the pneuma, is not a fragment of the divine given to you as a gift. It is the monad's own nature, dwelling inside materiality, temporarily unaware of what it is. You are not reaching toward the monad, you are the monad reaching toward itself through the particular form of a human being. This is the idea the Archons cannot afford for you to internalize, because the moment you internalize it, really internalize it, not as an intellectual position but as a lived recognition, the entire architecture of control collapses. You cannot sell permission to someone who has already understood they never needed it. You cannot maintain the leverage of unworthiness over someone who has recognized their own nature. Can't exactly put a collection plate in front of someone's internal awakening, just saying. I personally think this is the most philosophically radical claim in all of ancient spirituality. More radical than resurrection, more radical than enlightenment as most traditions define it, because it doesn't just elevate the human being, it dissolves the category of separation entirely. There is no bridge to build between you and the divine because there was never a river. The river was the story. The Gospel of Philip puts it plainly. Those who say they will die first and then rise are in error. If they do not first receive the resurrection while they live, when they die, they will receive nothing. The resurrection the Gnostics were pointing at wasn't a future event. It was a present recognition, a waking up to what you already are. That's the hidden exit. Not through death, not through doctrine, not through the right institution's approval, through recognition. Now, while you're still here. Let me tell you about the moment I understood why this was buried so thoroughly. I was going through Irenaeus of Lyon's treatise Against Heresies, written around 180 CE, one of the earliest and most systematic attacks on Gnostic Christianity. And I was struck not by the arguments Irenaeus was making, but by the intensity with which he was making them. He wasn't annoyed, he was threatened. The language isn't the language of someone correcting a minor doctrinal error. It's the language of someone trying to dismantle something that is actively pulling people away from an institution. And then I found the detail that changed how I read the whole period. Valentinus, one of the most intellectually formidable Gnostic teachers in history, whose system was sophisticated enough that even some early church fathers admitted they couldn't immediately counter it, came within a single vote of becoming Bishop of Rome. One vote. If that vote had gone the other way, the entire trajectory of Western Christianity shifts. Gnostic ideas are not the fringe, they are the mainstream. The suppression doesn't happen. The Nag Hammadi texts never need to be hidden. One vote. Instead, what happened over the next 2 centuries was one of the most thorough intellectual suppressions in Western history. Councils were convened, canons were established. The texts that survived, the ones that became the Bible as most people know it, were selected, edited, and framed within a theological architecture that positioned the human being as fundamentally fallen, fundamentally distant from God, fundamentally in need of institutional mediation to close that gap. The texts that didn't fit that architecture were condemned. Communities that preserved them were disbanded. Teachers who transmitted their ideas were excommunicated, exiled, or worse. The Nag Hammadi library itself, those 52 texts found buried in an Egyptian jar in 1945, survived only because someone, sometime in the 4th century, hid them rather than burned them when the destruction orders came down. We know the destruction orders were followed elsewhere. Entire libraries of Gnostic material are simply gone. Now, here's what I want you to sit with. The argument used against the Gnostics was not primarily that they were factually wrong about cosmology. The argument was that their ideas were dangerous, destabilizing, that they undermined proper order and proper authority. Irenaeus said explicitly that the Gnostic teachers were leading people to think they didn't need the church, the sacraments, or the bishops as intermediaries. Read that again slowly. The charge against the Gnostics was that they were teaching people they didn't need intermediaries. When an institution attacks a teaching, not because it's false, but because it removes the institution's functional necessity, you are looking at suppressed truth. That's not a theological argument. That's a business argument. And it has been running, largely unchallenged, for 17 centuries. One viewer left a comment under my video, "I stopped praying and called the monad instead," that I keep coming back to. They wrote, "I've gone to church my entire life, and I've always had this quiet sense that something was being managed about what I was allowed to believe. I couldn't articulate it until now." That comment sat with me for a long time, because that quiet sense isn't paranoia. It isn't spiritual immaturity. It is accurate perception. Something has been managed. Something very specific has been managed. And the Nag Hammadi discovery in 1945 cracked the lid open on what that something was. The Archons, in the Gnostic framework, operate through systems, through structures that feel natural, inevitable, authorized. The church hierarchy wasn't the Archons in robes, it's more subtle than that. It's that the Archon principle, the principle of administered separation, of managed distance between the human and the divine, found its most effective human expression in institutions that made themselves indispensable intermediaries between you and the source. Remove the intermediary, and the Archon loses its mechanism. That's the hidden exit, and that's exactly why it was hidden. So let's go deeper into what the monad actually is, because if you're going to call to something, you need to understand its nature. And this is where the Gnostic texts become extraordinarily precise, far more precise than most people realize. The Apocryphon of John describes the monad this way. It is a monarchy with nothing above it. It is pure light which no eye can behold. That line, read it again. A monarchy with nothing above it. Not a king among kings, not a supreme deity within a hierarchy of deities. A singular, unbounded, self-contained source that does not exist within any system because all systems exist within it. Now here's where it gets cosmically significant. Most religious frameworks, and I mean most, position the divine at the top of a vertical structure. You are here, God is there. The distance between those 2 points is the spiritual problem that religion then offers to solve, usually through itself, through its rituals, its clergy, its sacraments. The monad, as described in the Gnostic tradition, doesn't occupy the top of that vertical structure. It obliterates the structure entirely. The monad is not above you in the hierarchy. It is the substance from which you are made. The Gospel of Philip puts it like this, and I spent a long evening once just circling this passage, reading it forward and backward, because it kept collapsing my assumptions. Those who say they will first die and then rise are mistaken. If they do not first receive the resurrection while they are alive, when they die they will receive nothing. Philip isn't talking about physical resurrection, he's talking about recognition, about whether you realize, while you are here, what you actually are. Because if you don't recognize it here, the system continues. The managed distance continues. The monad, in the Gnostic understanding, is not distant. It is the very ground of your being. You are, and I want to be precise about how I'm saying this, you are not a creature reaching upward toward the monad. You are a mode of the monad's self-expression that has temporarily forgotten its origin. The pleroma, the fullness, the divine totality, projected outward through a chain of emanations called eons, and somewhere in that process, a lower creative impulse arose. That impulse, the demiurge, fashioned the material world without full comprehension of the light it was working with. And the result was beings, you, me, all of us, who carry a divine spark but are embedded in a material structure that does not remind them of it. In fact, a material structure specifically designed to keep them from remembering it. That's the Archon mechanism. Not fire and brimstone, not obvious malevolence, administration, distraction, the relentless reinforcement of separation as the default experience of being alive. And here's where I want to introduce something that I personally think is the most misunderstood element in all of Gnostic cosmology. It's not the demiurge, it's not the Archons, it's the concept of the pneumatic spark, the pneuma, the divine seed carried in every human being. Because if that seed exists, and the Gnostic texts are unanimous that it does, then the entire project of spiritual life reorients. It's not about earning access. It's not about proving worthiness. It's about recognition. Recovering something that was never actually lost, only obscured. The trimorphic protonoia, one of the most dense and extraordinary texts recovered from Nag Hammadi, opens with the divine voice speaking directly. I am the voice that appeared through my thought. I am the one who is called she who reflects. I move in every creature. Not speaking from a distance, moving through, present tense, continuous. The divine not as destination, but as the very motion inside your own awareness. I remember sitting with that opening for the first time. I'm going to be honest, my first response wasn't illumination, it was resistance. Because if that's true, if the divine is already moving inside you, already present in every creature, then what exactly have we been doing? What have the centuries of petition and pleading and intermediary seeking been doing? And the uncomfortable answer the texts give is reinforcing the forgetting. Not maliciously necessarily, but structurally. The system that teaches you to seek outside is the system that profits from you never finding inside. Not ritual, not belief, not moral performance. The Gnostics were pointing at something that couldn't be administered, something that required no clergy, no confession booth, no collection plate. And that, more than any theological disagreement, is why Irenaeus of Lyon went after them the way he did in 180 CE. His treatise, Against Heresies, isn't really a theological debate. It's a defense of the intermediary model. Every page of it is, at root, an argument that you need the church to reach God. Every Gnostic text he attacked was, at root, an argument that you don't. So we've established what the monad is. We've established the architecture of the forgetting. Now comes the part that actually changes something. What is the monad call? And why does it work differently from prayer? I've been building toward this, and I don't want to rush it, because if you understand it only at the surface level, as a technique, as a method, as a spiritual practice to add to your existing toolkit, you will miss what it actually is. So stay with me. Prayer, in its most common form, operates on an assumption. The assumption is distance. When you pray, you are directing something outward and upward. You are acknowledging a gap between where you are and where the divine is, and you are attempting to bridge that gap through petition, through supplication, through the quality of your asking. The emotional architecture underneath prayer is, I am here, and what I need is there, and I am hoping something will move it toward me. The monad call operates on an entirely different assumption. Not petition, not bridging a gap, recognition. The monad call is not you reaching toward something outside. It's you turning a specific kind of attention inward. Not inward as in self-absorbed, but inward as in toward the source that is already present at the center of your own awareness. The distinction sounds subtle. It is not subtle. It changes everything about the posture. Here's the analogy that finally cracked it open for me. Imagine a wave on the ocean. The wave has height, movement, force, form. In every way that you can visually identify it, the wave is a real and distinct thing. But the wave is made of ocean. The wave is not ocean adjacent. It is not reaching toward the ocean hoping for some connection. The wave is the ocean expressing itself in a particular form at a particular moment. The monad call is the wave recognizing that it is the ocean. Not asking the ocean to show up, recognizing what it already is. In the Apocryphon of John, there's a passage where the divine voice speaks to the human being and says, I am the one who is with you always. I am the Father, I am the Mother, I am the Son. Always. Not when conditions are met, not after sufficient spiritual preparation. Always. The call isn't summoning something from afar. The call is remembering something that never left. Now practically, because I know that if I stay in the abstract too long, I'm going to lose you, what does this actually look like? The practice the Gnostic tradition points toward isn't elaborate. It doesn't require special vocabulary or ritual equipment. What it requires is a quality of attention that most people have never been trained to direct. because we are trained from childhood to look outward, to locate meaning, authority, and source outside ourselves. The monad call asks you to reverse that direction entirely. You're not emptying the mind, as in meditation. You're not petitioning, as in prayer. You're asking one question with every available faculty of your awareness. Not what am I aware of, but who is aware. Not the contents of consciousness, but consciousness itself. The witness, the light behind the seeing. That, right there, is what the Gnostic texts are pointing at when they say the divine spark resides in you. Not in your beliefs about yourself, not in your spiritual resume, in the bare fact of awareness itself. And this is where I need to bring in something a viewer named Marlo left in the comments on my video. I stopped praying and called the monad instead. Here's what changed. Marlo wrote, "I've been in church my whole life and no one ever once pointed me inward. Every direction was outward and upward, and I think I spent 30 years looking in the wrong direction and feeling guilty that nothing was landing." That comment sat with me for a long time, because Marlo isn't describing a failure of faith. Marlo is describing the precise result of a system that has every incentive to keep you looking outward. Keep you looking outward, and you'll keep returning to the institution that offers to manage that outward relationship for you. Can't exactly put a collection plate in front of someone's internal awakening. Just saying. But here's what that version leaves out, and this matters. The monad call isn't solipsism. It isn't narcissism dressed up in cosmological language. The recognition of the divine spark in you is not the same as declaring yourself God in the personal, ego-inflated sense. The Gnostic texts are very clear on this. What you're recognizing isn't the ego. It's what the ego is resting on. What every thought, every experience, every moment of perception is arising within. The monad is the ground. You are a particular expression of that ground, temporarily identifying with a surface form. The call is a reorientation, not a promotion. And when that reorientation happens, even partially, even for a moment, something shifts. Not externally, internally. Like a radio that has been scanning static, finally locking on to a clean signal. The frequency was always broadcasting. The receiver just wasn't tuned. I want to come back to something I said earlier, the hidden exit, because the title of this video isn't metaphor. The Gnostic tradition, read carefully and in full, rather than through the sanitized fragments that survived official approval, describes a genuine exit from the Archon mechanism. Not a physical escape, not death as liberation, although there are texts that deal with what happens at death, and I covered that in significant detail in my video, You Won't Reincarnate After Death. The Archons do this instead. The exit the Gnostics were pointing to was an interior one, a shift in what you take yourself to be. And the reason the Archons, in whatever form you understand that principle, have every interest in hiding it is precisely because it requires nothing they control. Think about what makes an exit hidden. It's not that it's invisible, it's that it's been made to look like something else, or like nothing at all. The Gnostic texts were burned not because they were false. If they were simply false, you ignore them. You don't organize imperial campaigns to destroy them. They were burned because they pointed to something that bypassed the entire structure of managed religion. Every community of Gnostic practitioners that was disbanded, every scroll that was confiscated and destroyed between the 2nd and 5th centuries CE, every teacher who was run out of their city or worse, the pattern isn't random. The pattern is consistent suppression of any teaching that renders the intermediary unnecessary. Irenaeus didn't just critique the Gnostics. He campaigned, he organized, he wrote to other bishops coordinating a systematic response. That's not how you respond to harmless eccentrics on the fringe. That's how you respond to something that threatens the architecture. I spent the better part of a week, and I mean late nights, notebooks full of cross-referenced passages, mapping the specific texts that Irenaeus named in Against Heresies against what we recovered from Nag Hammadi. And what struck me wasn't the theological disagreements. It was the target selection. The texts he went after hardest were the ones most focused on interior recognition. The Gospel of Philip, the Apocryphon of John, the texts that told you the kingdom was within, that the divine spark was already present, that gnosis was direct and unmediated. Those were the dangerous ones. Not the texts with elaborate cosmological diagrams, the texts that made the intermediary structurally irrelevant. That's the tell. I'm Daniel, and this is Gnostic Talk, and I want to say something directly before we move into the close of this. I have been sitting with this material for years now, and what I have watched, with something between amazement and grief, is how consistently people who find their way to this tradition describe the same experience. A sense of recognition. Not discovery, recognition. Like they're not learning something new, but remembering something very old. Something that was always present, but had been systematically directed away from. That's not coincidence. That's not confirmation bias. That's the pneumatic spark responding to content that addresses it directly rather than administering it from a distance. Now, the cost, because there is one. And I want to be honest about it rather than sell you a version of this that sounds only like liberation with no complications. Taking the hidden exit costs you the comfort of the managed system. And I do not say that lightly. There is real comfort in institutional religion. There is community, there is ritual that marks time, there is a shared framework that gives your experiences a name and a place. When you step out of the petition model, when you stop asking the intermediary to manage your relationship with the divine, you lose those scaffolding structures. And for a period, that feels like loss. It can feel like freefall. The Gnostic texts knew this. The Pistis Sophia, a long, complex text in which Mary Magdalene figures as the primary questioner, deals extensively with what happens to the soul that has begun to move toward recognition but is not yet stable in it. The confusion, the disorientation, the Archon forces described in the text with almost clinical specificity that attempt to pull it back into familiar patterns. This isn't metaphor dressed up as cosmology. It's an accurate phenomenological description of what happens when you begin to withdraw your consent from the managed distance model. You will feel the pullback, the doubt that sounds like reason, the anxiety that presents itself as wisdom, the voice that says, maybe the intermediary wasn't the problem, maybe you were the problem, maybe you should go back. Stay with the disorientation long enough, and something on the other side of it becomes available. Not certainty in the institutional sense. You won't have a new set of authorities telling you what to think. What becomes available is something quieter, a quality of interior steadiness that doesn't depend on external confirmation. The Gnostic word for this isn't belief. It isn't faith in the conventional sense. It's gnosis, knowledge. Direct, interior, unmediated. The exit was hidden because it leads somewhere the Archon principle cannot follow. Not into a new system, not into a better managed version of the same distance. Into the recognition that the distance was always the illusion. That the monad, the unbounded, boundless, uncontainable source, was never on the other side of a gap you needed help crossing. It was the ground you were standing on the whole time. Stop petitioning. Start recognizing. You weren't made to reach toward the divine from a distance. You were made to be the expression through which the divine recognizes itself. That's not poetry. That's the oldest suppressed claim in Western spiritual history. And it's yours if you're willing to stop asking permission to access it. If this landed for you, if something in this resonated in a way you've been waiting a long time to have named, let me know by commenting, "I found the exit." I read every one of those comments, and I'll see you in the next one.